Are you concerned that your accent in English is holding you back professionally, perhaps hurting you in interviews, and even preventing your acceptance to professional schools of your dreams? We're joined today by an accent reduction expert, and she's going to tell you ways to reduce your accent and stop it from getting in your way.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Before we dive into today's interview, I want to mention a free resource at Accepted that can benefit you if you're applying to graduate school. The challenge at the heart of admissions is showing that you both fit in at your target schools and stand out in the applicant pool. Accepted's free download, Fitting In and Standing Out, the paradox at the heart of admissions, will show you how to do both. Master this paradox and you're well on your way to acceptance. You can download your free guide at accepted.com/FISO, which stands for Fitting In, Standing Out. Again, it's accepted.com/FISO for Fitting In, Standing Out. It gives me great pleasure to have on Admission Straight Talk for the first time, Esther Bruhl, a speech pathologist who specializes in accent reduction for non-native English speakers. Esther is also the founder of Speak More Clearly, both the site and the YouTube channel. And I think she's the first guest we have had from down under, also known as Australia. Esther, welcome to Admission Straight Talk.
Thank you, Linda, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you could join us. Now, how did you get into the whole accent reduction field? My father had an accent you could slice with a knife.
Oh, right, okay.
Hungarian.
Okay, yes. Those ones you slice with a knife, yes.
Right. Okay.
Definitely. I'm a speech and language pathologist. I work with children who have speech and language problems, but I also work with adults who feel they can't be clear. And another speech pathologist and I started doing groups for people, like face-to-face in our clinic a long time ago, because in Australia, like in America, there are lots and lots of people who have second languages. They've come from other places. And in fact, in Australia, we have over 400, I'm sure it's the same in America, over 400 other languages that other people speak. Yeah, it's fantastic, yeah. And so we started these for people who were professionals at working either on the phone or all sorts of other professions, lawyers, whatever. And they were feeling not confident and not good about the fact that they couldn't be understood. People had to keep asking them to repeat themselves, etc., which is very frustrating, actually. And so we started those at a very small level, and then more and more people were sort of coming along. And so, and she pulled out, she went to do something else, and I just continued on. And the more people we had, then we realized we had to make some courses. We originally just had audio courses, but now we have video and audio, the whole shebang online. And that's how I started. And I got more and more interested in it as I went along. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
So I assume at this point you're mostly working with adults, no longer with children, right?
Oh no, I still do have a children caseload.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have both, but I do have a lot of adults and a lot of, we do podcasts, videos, all sorts of things. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
What causes accents?
I think this is a great question. It's a really great question. So
you and I are both speaking English, but we definitely
have an accent. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Actually, I think just you have the accent, but
yeah, of course. I think I have the accent. I love it that we all have different English accents as well. Yeah.
Right.
What causes an accent, even our native accent, is when we're very, very young and we start to learn language, we actually hear all the sounds that there are to make. And when we babble all the sounds, all different sounds, even the and the schm and the whatever that are not in our native languages that we finally get. And slowly over time, as we're learning our native language or languages, we diminish our auditory acuity for all those other sounds and only focus on the sounds that are in our native language or languages. And at the same time, what we're doing is learning to move our mouth in a certain way, organize our articulators in a certain way to only use those sounds as well. Because before, when we're babbling, we're saying all sorts of odd sounds that are not in our language. And then slowly that takes over and we no longer use all those other sounds. And therefore we have an American accent in English or an Australian accent in English or whatever language we're speaking. That is partly to do with our neurological centers, our language listening areas. So the language listening areas are very open at that point in time when we're 1-2 years old. As we get older, those centers are no longer necessarily needed as much. And we're developing other neurological connections and pathways. And so the focus goes over to walking or reading or whatever it is. In most people, those centers they're there because we have to use our language, but they're not continuing to develop per se. And so the language listening areas they don't close, but they're not making new connections as well. So we are therefore have our original accents. When we go to learn a new language with a new accent, then we have to rework those centers. And some people's language listening abilities and those centers are poor in the first place. Those connections are poor. So, and I'll talk about that a bit later, but and therefore that's how we get our accents. But also in the new languages, let's say I'm going to learn a new language, there will be sounds and I will have to move my mouth differently to what my automatic movement is. And there will be sounds that I'm not used to that I have to learn. So if I don't do that, then I grab a sound from my original language that is close to that, and that's how I get an accent in the new language.
So for example, in many languages, the W, the W sound in
Yes.
English is very difficult to say.
Yes.
And I think frequently V
Yes.
is substituted, or sometimes
That's it.
R. But
Yes, exactly. So ven instead of wen, or vi instead of wa.
right.
Yeah, because they're close, but it's not exact. Yeah.
Right. I mentioned my father's accent. I worked for him when I was right out of college. And one day I happened to be sitting in his office and he called a manager in and he had an envelope and he said to the manager, "Please give this to Mr. Wasserman." And the manager said, "Okay, when Mr. Wasserman gets here, I'll give it to him." And my father said, and I couldn't laugh. And my father said, "No, not Mr. Wasserman, Mr. Wasserman, W."
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, VA, because the manager really was with a V.
V. Oh,
but the manager automatically corrected because of my father's accent.
yes.
Yeah. So, but what you're saying, so I'm just as you're telling,
Yes.
giving the background, I'm
Yes.
thinking back to that story,
Yes.
which was again, I was right out of college then.
Yeah,
Now,
definitely.
some people from the same countries seem to have understandable accents. You know, they might all come from Russia, they might all come from Germany, or they might all come from wherever.
Yeah.
And some have accents that are very difficult to understand, or India for that matter, even if they're fairly fluent in the language.
Yeah.
Why is that? Does that still have to do with that kind of neurological training?
It does.
Or adaptability?
The neurological adaptability and the language listening ability. You know, there are some people who are amazing mimics.
Yes.
You know, they can mimic straight away. And then there are other people who that center may not have, yes, they learnt their original language and they're pretty okay in it and they can learn English and be fluent in it, but their ability to attune to the different sounds and frequencies is poorer than the next person, let's say.
Right.
And even still, I've had people, for instance, who have said to me, "Oh, look, I only learnt the R in my original language when I was in the middle of whatever you call primary school, middle school." and so they would have a really big difficulty learning a different R, for instance, or whatever. I had a gentleman who was from China and he said, "Oh, even in my original dialect," he said, "I couldn't pronounce the difference between L and N. So I
L
had
and N, really?
L and N, yeah, he said. At the moment, I'm working with somebody from Venezuela who said to me, even in Spanish, people find me difficult to understand.
Wow. So
Yeah.
is that already a speech impediment, or is that an accent?
Well, he didn't actually have an impediment. What his thing was he was what's called a clutterer. So he would everything will get gobbled up because his rhythm, his cerebellum, or the other areas that organize rhythm and frequency and rhythm and organization of rhythm, he wasn't able to control very well, and so everything would get gobbled up. Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
swallowed his words, in other words,
Yeah.
even the
Yeah.
Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What are some key tips for accent reduction, no matter where you're coming from, or perhaps even what the cause is? I guess the most common cause is, like you say, this developmental area kind of stops developing.
Yeah. That's part of it. But also, can I start by saying that
Sure.
often, and you would know this because of your, getting people accepted into different courses, etc. Often people learn English but forget that the pronunciation is important as well. So they get out of college and then they go for a job interview or something, and they've learned English, they've worked really hard on it, they're fluent, it's fantastic, but they've not realized that it's important to be clear as well. And so they go for the interview, and I've had lots of professionals come to me or students out of college saying, oh, look, I went for this interview and they said, wow, your skills are fantastic, you really know the area, but your communication skills are not exactly what we need. Go and get clearer and then come back. So my first thing I would like to say about this is, while you're learning your English, pay attention to your pronunciation as well at the same time. Just don't ignore it. Yeah. So that's one of the tips. But the next tip is be patient with yourself. So you're learning to move your mouth differently. You're having to make that automatic. It's like tennis. If you want to change your tennis grip, you have to actually get a new motor planning, a new action that your hand has to remember. Same with your mouth. So be patient with yourself. People go, oh, I want a new accent in 2 weeks. No, I don't think so. Okay. And I know some people in a hurry because they have that interview, which is fair enough, yeah. The next thing is know that you're learning to change the way that you move your mouth. Okay, so some people will repeat after the trainer in our course, and that's why we have video training so they can see exactly how. And we also have a description of exactly how to put your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your everything. And some people will mimic the trainer or whatever they're using, and do exactly the same thing with their mouth again. Like you were saying, what are you doing? So they would do exactly the same thing, or rise, and trill their R, for instance. Yeah.
Right.
And just know that you're learning to move your mouth a different way. The next thing is listen and repeat. I had a guy he was actually in England, and he was listening to BBC radio, and he said, I've been listening for years. And he was from India. And he said, I've been listening for years and I still haven't changed my accent. I said to him, are you just listening, or are you repeating and mimicking exactly like you mimic someone to make fun of them, which is not nice, but that's what you have to do, And he went, oh, no, I'm only listening. Well, you have to listen and repeat. You can record yourself, go back and listen, see if you're closer to the production of whoever you're practicing with. Yeah. Another point is, while you're practicing, also listen for the rhythm, the intonation, and the stress. I'll talk about those a bit later as well. And I'd just like to mention that on our website, speakmoreclearly.com, there is a tab called English Pronunciation Tips. And there's a whole lot of training lessons there that people can access if they want to, on different particular pronunciation elements.
We're going to link to the Speak More Clearly site from exit.com/433 also. Those were really good tips, very general tips. I'm also wondering, you were saying that somebody was listening to a BBC broadcast. is it helpful to sometimes, let's say, listen to a news broadcast, but not just listen, watch,
Yes.
so that they're actually seeing how the broadcaster is moving their mouth?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. And if you're doing it on a replay, you can stop, mimic, then do it again and listen. Podcasts are great for that, although you can't. I mean, if it's a video podcast like this, yes. If it's an audio podcast, you can still stop and mimic and repeat, but you have to repeat. I go back to like the tennis thing. If you don't do the practice, your hand and your muscle memory will never happen, Right. So it's the muscle memory in the mouth. Yeah. And the new neurological pathways. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned somebody coming from India, and we've certainly had clients who come from India. Their English may actually be quite fluent, and they could have been speaking English from early childhood, maybe even educated English, but they have a very thick accent that is hard for at least Americans to understand. Maybe Australians, you're closer, it's easier, I don't know. But
sometimes depends on how heavy the accent is. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have any, and I'm going to guess that there are probably tips that are geared to different nationalities, because again, their mouth is trained in a particular way, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So do you have any tips for Indians, people from India?
Sure. Okay, so for Indians, one of the main things which kills two birds with one stone for Indians is to learn to make their vowels long enough. Okay, because Indian languages, all of the background Indian languages, the rhythm is much faster than English. Okay, and it's hard for them to just, if I say slow down, they don't know what that means. So if you stretch your vowels and make them long enough, then you're taking care of the listener, A, and B, you're slowing down. So a lot of background languages have a syllable timed, and English is stress timed. So syllable time languages are like machine guns. Da, 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 da. Stressed.
German, for example?
German is halfway between both. It has a bit of both. Okay. Yeah, it's really
What's a very common?
Chinese, Indian, Japanese, they're all syllable time. They take a break between every single syllable, basically. A very short one, okay? But most of the Asian languages are syllable timed. The European ones, they're a bit of a mix sometimes, yeah? They don't link as much, but Indian languages definitely, da, 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 yeah? And the rhythm is much faster. So if I say, can I go? Can I go? So I'm shortening my vowels because they're not as short as that in English. The diphthongs, the ones where you have to put two vowels together, are they only say one, the first sound. So can I go? If I do a somewhat American accent. So
I was thinking that actually. Yeah.
Can, so the a is much longer. Can I? It's made of two sounds. I go, made of the American R and O. So you have to do all. You can't just do go instead of go. Yeah.
Right.
Can I go? Can I go? Yeah. And slowing down doesn't mean that people will think you're stupid. Okay. It just means you'll be understood. Yeah. So can I go instead of can I go? Can I go? Yeah. So you can hear that the vowels are said longer and made properly. Yeah. So for Indians, that is one of the keys. Making the vowels properly. Yeah. So also in all of the Indian languages, they don't release or aspirate or put air into P for Polly, T for Tom, or K for kitten. So if I say the word pie, okay, they go bye. So it's a but, not a p. So it's as if you're whispering, like you're in the movie theater, yeah? Pie. And then the T is the same. I have to put air. It's not dop, but top. So learn, or ki. It's not ki, g, it's ki. It's called aspirating, putting air into your consonants. Those particular unvoiced consonants need it. Otherwise, it's a dead giveaway and you're not as clear in English. Hold the TH long enough. It's not think, it's think. You have to let a nanosecond longer air out before you move your tongue away from the sticking out tongue position. Yeah. And intonation, it's hard because they go up and down in a different way, and basically they're flat with up and down, and we just aren't flat underneath. We go up and down, up and down. That's us more. American, Australian, similar thing.
That was fascinating.
Yeah.
What about Chinese, or would it be fairly similar?
Yeah, it's still syllable time. So but they're even more. In a longer word, they'll make a break even in the middle of the longer words. So they'll go ko x, like there's a break in the middle because you have to do each syllable. So again, syllable timed. But what they need to do is learn to link. The Indians know how to link a bit better. They still need to learn it a bit. But for instance, if I say, can I go out and see it? Okay. Can I? So you're linking the N to the I. Yeah?
Yeah.
Go out, you're putting a W in the middle to join the two vowels. And see it. So you're linking. Whenever a word ends in a consonant, the next one begins with a vowel, you join the last consonant onto the beginning of the next word. But it's can I go out and see it? That's the staccato. So every single syllable has to have a little pause after, because that's how you speak. Yeah. The other thing they tend to do, and this is a really good tip for them because this really makes them not so clear, is the Chinese speakers is they often leave the final consonant off a word because a lot of their words end in vowels and a lot of our words end in consonants. Yeah. So they'll say, for the word outside, they'll say outside. So the T and the D got left. Or if I say 9 things, they'll go nothings. So the N gets left off. So they need to actually make the extra movement, tell their mouth to make the extra movement for that extra sound before they move on.
That's really interesting. Okay. I always think of the biggest issue with the Chinese is the difficulty with the letter L.
They have that. They also, a lot of them make N for NG at the end of a word. So that's, NG for N. So they'll say on instead of on. On instead of on. Yeah. So, but L and R, it depends on where they come from, whether it's Mandarin, whether it's Cantonese, whether it's Hokkien or whatever. Yeah.
Would you have any difficulty working with someone who wants to have, because you have, to my ear, you have an Australian accent.
Yes.
Would you have difficulty working with someone who wants to have an American accent or aims to go to school in the US or work in the US?
Yeah. I can work with somebody who has an American accent. I can put on my American accent, but I also...
You do pretty well, actually.
Yeah, thank you. But I can also, we have our course, obviously, so they work with the course as well as working with us. But we also have American accent courses, British accent courses, Australian accent courses. So we have a trainer in America. She's also, all our trainers are currently speech and language therapists who specialize and have had many years expertise in whichever accent they're in, whatever country they're in. So we have we have a couple of Americans, we have a British person, we have another Australian person, and a couple of them also do voice work. So if people want a richer voice and projection and all of that. But yes, I can work with, I've been working with people and training them with an American accent and using our course and etc. Yeah.
Is there any kind of accent that's particularly difficult to lose?
Yes. Look, it depends on the person, but some languages don't have...
I'm thinking of Henry Kissinger at the moment.
Yeah, Henry. Yes. Okay.
And I think he came to the United States when he was 13 and he's 90 something now, and he still has a very thick German
he
accent.
Does. Yeah. Look, there is that thing of if you come after a certain age, it is harder, but you can still do it. People have done it. It is harder, but you just have to work a bit longer at it. But obviously Henry felt he was clear enough, so he didn't bother to do anything about it.
He seems to have done pretty well.
Yeah,
for
that's
himself.
right. Exactly.
Professor at Harvard, Secretary of State. He did
That's
okay.
right. Yeah, that's right. And he went, I wasn't, it was a different time as well. The moment there's a bit going on about accepting people and who they are and what they are, and that's a whole other thing at the moment. But yeah, there are original languages that don't have 6 or 7 of our sounds. For instance, Korean. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like we have 6 or 7 more sounds than Korean has, for instance. So for them, it's almost like they're breaking their mouth sometimes to get to. So it takes them, they can do it, but it takes them a little longer, for instance. There are African languages. I worked with a lady recently where, if a word ends in a D in this African language, it doesn't just have a D. The N and the D are said together as a partnership. So taking the N out has been incredibly difficult because she automatically puts the N in when a word ends in a D. So if you say the word head, for instance, she'll say hand, or good, she'll say gund. And it's like, and for her, and she's a really conscientious worker, but because nd is something that automatically happens, and they're close together on the palate up above behind the front top teeth. So those sorts of ones where it's so far from English are difficult for people. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for the spoken portion of, let's say, English language tests like the IELTS or the TOEFL or the PTE? I mean, it's happened less in recent years, but there was a time when every so often I would see really high, let's say, TOEFL scores, and the English fluency or the understandability of the individual with this high score was really low.
Yeah. And that goes back to that original point I made where people, especially in some countries, they only focus on the English and not on how to say the English as well. Yeah.
Right.
One of the biggest tips that I have for this is to open your mouth more. Okay. And I know that sounds funny, but I found with working with hundreds of people and many, many different language backgrounds, in English, we tend to open our mouth more. We move our lips forward more. So if I'm saying ooh, for instance, they'll go ooh, and we'll go ooh, right? The same, that example of go, yeah? And they'll go go. So they won't, the ah and the ah, all of those sounds, you have to open more and move more. And they say to me, oh, my mouth is hurting because in order to be clearer, you have to, so that's a big tip for people to learn to open. So they can stand in front of a mirror, whatever they're practicing, the topics for the IELTS or the PET, or you know how they have different topics, and they all are always practicing it anyway. So go and stand in front of a mirror and say 3 or 4 lines and move your mouth more. Overdo it at first. And then when you're in the test, you won't be moving it as much. You'll be nervous as well. You'll be moving it enough. Yeah. And people say to me, oh, it really feels weird. Yep. But now you're clear, you know. So that if they only did that, that would be something really good. Yeah. Because often it's like this, they're not moving much because they don't have to in their own language. Yeah.
I did, I think this was when I was a student, I did a year abroad. I was in Israel actually. And there were some Israelis teasing the American students. And what they did is they just exaggerated their mouth movements because to them, they were like, oh, well, you know, that's how Americans talk.
Yes.
And of course, Hebrew is a much more guttural language.
Yes.
So the idea of moving your mouth, again, it just reminds me of that experience.
And Hebrew has combinations like a t and a ch together. Chelet, for instance. You know,
sure.
Things,
I know that.
things, but it is more
sound in general, which you don't have at all in English.
No.
And there's some other sounds that.
Yeah.
I have a thick accent in Hebrew, so I can have a good juicy American accent. But I remember that was that to them. That's what.
And that's what I mean. You have to move your mouth more. For even a lot of the European languages I have, we have to work on moving lips forward, lips smile, mouth open to actually be clearer. It also makes sense for resonance. If you're speaking to somebody, you're opening more for the resonance to come out. You're not just going like this because you know what I mean? Yeah.
Right,
So that's one
right.
thing. Especially for the IELTS, people feel nervous. I understand that. Learn to abdominal breathe. So if you put your hand on your belly button and you breathe into that and push it out, that's giving you, and so you take 3 deep breaths before you go in to do your speaking test. And you can, it ties in with my next point, which is phrasing and pausing. So in English, we phrase, we chunk things. So if I say, I went to the store and I met my friend and I had a coffee, okay? So where the commas would be is where I pause, because they're chunks of meaning that I'm giving you. I went to the store is telling you where I went. I met my friend is telling you what I did in that part. And I had a coffee is telling you what I did after I met my friend. Now, if there aren't any commas, you're still chunking and pausing. Learn to use pauses, I would say to them, learn to use pauses, because we do that in English, so that the listener has time to integrate the bits that inside, the comprehension bits that you want them to understand. And especially if they're talking about something technical, because then it's comprehension dense. There's a lot more to understand in each piece of the sentence, or giving a speech or something like that. And you can breathe. So breathe a quick. So when the professionals, the actors or the professional speakers, when they're speaking and they take a pause, they do a quick breath into the abdomen through their mouth, and then they keep going. And that calms the nervous system down and makes you feel more confident. So that's that one. To go with that, inside of the phrasing is stressing main meaning words. English listeners listen for the stressed and de-stressed in words. And I went to the store, so went and store are the main meaning words. So it's like I just came off the boat from some other country and I'm trying to tell you something. I use the nouns, the verbs, the adverbs, and the adjectives. I stress them. So went, store, met, friend, had coffee. You would understand what I meant. They're the words that the vowel has to be stretched, made slightly longer, and higher pitch. That's how you emphasize a word, or emphasize if we want to, yeah. So stressing or emphasizing the words that carry the meaning, if you see what I mean, yeah?
Yeah.
Is another thing that's really important for IELTS. You can't just go in and say, in my hometown, we have 500 people and we all go to the baker every morning. And no, that's not English. It's the pausing and the stressing that makes it more intelligible. If that
Monotone is not really English.
No. So that's another thing. Another thing, can I do a couple more?
Sure, absolutely.
I call it a mental action for being clear. So in the speaking part of the IELTS, obviously, yes, you have to have fluent English and the idioms and all of that they want you to know, but you also have to be clear. The mental action for being clear to me is stepping into the accent. So can I go? If I say that normally, can I go? That's my Australian accent. Can I go? I've stepped into the accent, the American accent. I'm wearing it. I have to hear myself differently. I have to be willing psychologically to change my mental action and step into that other, and to be willing to use it. People use it when they're working with us, or when they're practicing with the course, or when they're practicing with their trainer, whoever, and then they don't use it when they go out. And I know it's hard, but piece by piece, you have to step in and actually use it.
It's almost like learning the foreign language itself. You can learn it in class, And yet when you go in the street, assuming you're in the foreign country,
Yes.
you are afraid to use it.
Yes.
Is it similar?
Yes, definitely.
Sounds like-
Yeah. And I understand that, but you just got to be brave and try. And the more you try, the better you get at it. Yeah. Yeah.
Worst thing is you say something wrong.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. And people are patient.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're usually kind. If they're not
Yeah.
kind, it's their problem.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's an important one as well. The other thing which you guys probably teach is organizing. Think about what you're going to say beforehand. Organize, practice all of those. Organize the intro, the middle, the end, all the vocab, etc., the vocabulary, etc. Because and say it over and over, because as soon as you've organized it, then you're more free to actually think about how you're saying it as well, to a certain degree.
Well, one of the things we definitely tell our clients before an interview is when you're in the interview, take a second or two to think about how you want to respond. Don't just blurt it out.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
that's
guess-
okay.
Sure, and maybe
Yeah.
for the international applicant or non-native English speaker, even take a split second to think about how you want to say it.
Yeah.
Elongating the vowels or whatever is relevant for your
Yes.
particular situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's
Now-
okay to take a pause. Really.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, most interviewers are 100%, they'd much rather have you take a pause and give an articulate response than
Yeah.
blurt out something that doesn't respond to their question or isn't well organized and well
Yeah.
thought out.
Yeah, exactly.
How can Speak More Clearly, your company, your website, help applicants who want to reduce their accents before, let's say, an interview or before
Yeah.
they start class or before they start interacting with the schools that they are dying to get into?
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, we have our courses, our accent modification courses. Some people want to have a total American accent. Some people want to be clear but retain some of their accent. Some people, it's all there. They can do any of those permutations. We've even got actors who use our course to Australians to get American accents, etc.
Sure.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so we've got the courses, but if you have your interview, let's say in 2 months' time, right, you're not going to be able to change your accent in 2 months using the course. It takes a few months longer to do that, you know. So we also have one-on-one coaching. And as I said before, we've got trainers in different countries with the different accents, as well as, you know, I can do the accents too. But the one-on-one coaching, I've had people come in and say, I've got this interview in 2 months' time. And so we work on what the vocabulary is, what they have to say, what the type of specific stuff is that they know they're going to be asked. And we work on that and we make them clearer and clearer and more flowing. And that is the one-on-one coaching. And they get the immediate feedback and the immediate, no, put your mouth this way, or no, you didn't do that one quite right. This is how you stretch it out, or whatever the thing is, you know. So they get that real-time feedback, and it's specific to whatever it is that they have to say in those interviews or going into the college interview or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have applicants going into business school interviews, medical school interviews, occasionally other graduate interviews. It could be PhD or whatever, or just meeting, especially for the PhD, meeting with professors.
Right.
I would say probably fewer med school, because at least in the United States, most American med schools will really only consider applicants who have US undergraduate degrees, the overwhelming
okay.
majority.
Right.
But for business schools, engineering schools, et cetera, if they require interviews, then you already have a significant international representation.
Mm.
And the schools definitely want people who can communicate
Yeah.
Intelligibly
Yeah.
in English.
Yeah.
It's not
Oh,
just
definitely.
the written language, it's the spoken language as
Yeah.
well.
And especially also those, I don't know if you deal with these sorts of colleges or schools, but for counselling and preschool teaching and things like that, where it's important for those other ones, but it's also important for that sort of a profession
Sure,
as well.
definitely deal
Yeah.
with PsyDs, clinical psychologists, social workers.
Yeah.
PhDs in psychology also. Not
yeah,
so much the preschool teacher, we don't get that
no,
many of that, not many of that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
obviously it's important that they communicate.
yeah, yeah.
In most fields, there are very few fields where communications is not at least
No, that's
somewhat
true.
important.
That's true.
Very few.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would have liked me to ask you?
I think we've covered most of it. One of our clients recently was saying to us, she worded it really well. She said, you know, we're so fluent and at ease, and we can express ourselves so well in our original language.
Yeah.
And then we come to whatever other, let's say English, because we're talking about English. And we feel, she said, it's almost like a feeling of disability. You know, like you cannot show who you are. You cannot express yourself with that ease, with that you want to speak at a higher level, at a philosophical or a deeper theoretical or whatever it is, and you just can't do it.
You just don't have the words, you just don't have the
Yeah.
vocabulary.
Yeah, and even if you do, it's like unclear and you have to repeat it. And she was saying, you know, so she was really pleased that she could get that sort of help, but it is very frustrating for a lot of people.
Well, it sounds to
Yeah.
me like what you're dealing with a lot is people who have perhaps the vocabulary, but because the pronunciation isn't
It's-
where it should be, they're
Yeah.
still not being understood.
No, that's right. And we also have people who are being understood, but they're sick of being asked where they're from, which is an interesting, different twist on this, you know. But most of the people we get are professionals who feel that it's holding them back in their career if they've already got into a company or whatever, or that, as I said before, they're going for these interviews and either fresh out of college or they've had a job and they want another job, and they're being told that their communication skills aren't good enough. And in Australia, maybe this is in America, you can tell me, that here there's this emphasis on team and socializing with the team and being part of the
it's true
team.
here too.
Yeah. And so that whole water cooler thing of standing and having a conversation with your mates or going out for the drinks, at, you know, whatever, when you can go out for drinks or whatever. And so that's really important. And in Australia, it's important to be seen as socially also part of the team. And people really feel not confident sometimes to just go out socially and express what they want to express. Again, because there's a lot of noise in a social situation. And if you're not clear, you're really going to have to repeat yourself 5 times, you know.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, for sure.
It is tricky.
You know,
Yeah.
again, it's hard to communicate in a second language. But what we're really talking about, people who almost have the language, but it's just that pronunciation that's holding them back.
Yeah.
And I think you've provided our listeners with lots of advice. And we do have a lot of international listeners and a lot of clients for whom English is a second language.
Yeah.
So I want to really thank you for joining me today.
You're
Where
welcome.
can listeners find you online again?
So speakmoreclearly.com, all spelled normally. That's our website, and our YouTube channel also. If you go to YouTube, if you go to YouTube and put in Speak More Clearly, there is somebody else who's also stolen the name, but you'll see my picture as the one that's our channel. And there are lots and lots, again, of videos with specific pronunciation training on there as well that they can access. Yeah.
And again, you have Australian, British, and American accent training.
Accent training, yeah. So
Wonderful.
yeah. We also have a voice course, actually, if people want to. For people, anybody, you don't have to have an accent, just Americans or whoever, if they want to have a richer speaking voice, if they have to present a lot, and different tips about that as well. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we're going to include links in the show notes at accept.com/433 to speak more clearly, Esther Bruhl's website and her YouTube channel. Yeah. Listener, thank you too for joining Esther Bruhl and me for our 433rd episode. And a quick reminder, master the paradox at the heart of graduate admissions by downloading your free copy of Fitting In and Standing Out, the paradox at the heart of admissions. Grab your copy at accepted.com/FISO. Thanks again for coming. This is Admission Straight Talk, produced by Accepted, and I am your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.